All right, hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out as always. So today, as I promised a little while ago, I'm going to film a bit of a tutorial or a how-to video and show you guys how I approach these mini Shadowbox altars that I've been showing off. Really simple, you'll see. So I chose a fun card to play with today with you guys. So I'll switch over, and not a super pretty desk that I have set up here today, but we're going to get to work and we're going to play around a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I approach these altars. Okay, so I chose Ira. Ira is a really fun hero to play in Blitz, of course, but also I think this is a really good example of how I would approach one of these mini Shadowbox altars. So I got a little bit of a head start on this one. So Ira, I just have a stack of cards here in sleeves. I already cut out a couple layers, so I have my border. And this is a cool thing that you can do, and I'll talk about the tools here in a second after I show you the cards that I have here, but this is a cool way to approach it. So actually, this is WTR, so this is Katsu's border, Ninja Hero Young, which applies to Ira as well, which is convenient. So one day, you know, I didn't really feel like doing super intricate stuff, so I just decided to sit there with the TV on and kind of cut out some borders that I could use for some of these altars. So I have a stack of borders that I can kind of pull from. Not necessary to do that, but that's how I approached it. So I had this border sitting around, and I'm going to use it for this this altar specifically. Ira is a young hero, ninja young hero with the same life total and intellect, of course. So I'm going to repurpose this border. I also did this layer as well. So this is my front layer, the layer that's going to sit immediately behind my border. And I wanted to cut this one out because I wanted to try out a couple backgrounds. It's important that you decide the right background. Lately, I've been playing around with putting foil cards in the background. I think it just helps, you know, the art further pop. So I cut out this layer before filming this so that I could decide on a background. And what I settled on was water glow lanterns. I think it's pretty cool, and I think the you know, the color palette used as well as sort of the subject matter in the background kind of works with Ira. So one thing you can do if you want to cut out, you know, your last layer, the layer that's going to be, I mean, there are a couple exceptions, of course, but the layer that's going to be right under the border is usually going to be your main character, right? So here I just have Ira. So I cut out that layer so that I could lay her on top of a couple backgrounds and try a couple on for size. I tend to like this one. You know, it's kind of calm, soothing. The blues and reds kind of work well with the color palette of the hero as well. I don't know, it's really preference. There are a couple borders that I'm sure would have worked well with this card, but this is the one that I chose to go with. Another couple observations right off the bat. So I chose my background, so this is going to be my bottom layer where I'm going to start layering all my cards. Honestly, this could be it. I could end it here, and this would be my mini Shadowbox altar. I call it mini because it doesn't have a lot of depth, right? It's only 3 cards thick, and the border is only 2 layers thick. Ira's only 1 layer thick, so this is good. I could end it here. I could glue these together, and I'll show you how I approach all that and the tools I use. But I decided to make it a little more interesting. I'm going to go 5 layers thick instead, and I'm going to do some cutting on screen here with you guys. So another thing. So this is what I decided on for a border. So I have, or a background, I have 3 layers done. I'm going to cut 2 more. So another thing, important to keep your blade sharp. So this is my Ira that I cut out last night. This is your main tool, okay? So this is just an X-Acto knife. You can get them at the craft store, and there are several different options. I went with the hard metal handle. You can get softer handles. These have blades that are easily interchangeable, which is important because you do want to change them relatively frequently. I was way overdue to change mine, and it was getting a bit dull and causing some fraying on the edges, so I just changed it last night before doing this altar, and man, did it make a difference. As you can see, I was able to really get some amazing detail. So even her like strands of hair, if you can see on the right side. I don't know if it's going to focus if I zoom in, probably not. Little strands of hair here on, this side of her head. So there's a lot of really small detail that I was able to achieve with a very, very sharp blade. Okay. So get yourself a good X-Acto knife. I like this one. One that you can change the blade on fairly easily. Get yourself, a collection of blades. Honestly, with a single blade, I probably pumped out 8 or 9 alters. I don't know, with multiple, layers that I needed to cut out. But again, you will really notice a difference. So if you want to stay sharp and you want those edges to be as sharp as possible, and you want to pick out some of those, interesting details, change your blade relatively frequently. Your main tool, X-Acto knife. Couple other tools. The markers I have sitting here, I stole these from my partner, and there's the sleeve that I have my cards in. These are watercolor dual tip markers. I don't know, you probably don't need to go this fancy. And I think this is like an off-brand, so it's probably not even that fancy. But this allows you, so once you do your cutting, you're going to end up with some frayed edges, or at least some white showing. Like the core of the card is white with a little black or blue layer, I can't remember. But in order to just go that extra mile, it's going to be quite difficult to see. But I color, so rather than having white edges, I color the edges based on, the color of the border, or the color of whatever feature I cut out. So I colored that blue. I colored the bottom here gray. So I used gray and blue and went around the edges just to get rid of some of those harsh whites that you end up with once you're done cutting. I think it helps just things blend a little bit better. I did the same thing with this layer already, and I'll show you how I would approach it with the other 2 layers. But, browns mostly, and it just, having the brown rather than the white, that you can see kind of a little bit of a white section under her hair there. That's the type of stuff that you'll end up with if you don't take a marker to it. So, I don't know. Another just added thing you can do. I really like these markers. I'll show you why. The watercolor ones, obviously lots and lots of color options here. They're dual tip, so you have a sharp tip on one end. But I really like using the brush tip. Looks like this, because it just allows you to really accurately kind of drag along the edges. So essentially all I'm doing, well, I'll show you how to do this later, is kind of just tilting it up and dragging my marker along the edge just to get rid of some of that whiting, okay? So I've already done it with this card, but I'll show you how I would approach it a bit later on. I'm going to put these markers aside for now. So my idea, while we're talking tools here, X-Acto knife, markers to get rid of the white edges. I also have a paintbrush here, you'll notice, and my glue. The glue, this is actually kind of an all-in-one thing. It's a glue sealer finish. This stuff is pretty widely used as far as I understand. I'm not into paper crafts other than this, in all sorts of paper crafts and things like that. So Mod Podge, I love to call it Mod Podge for some reason. It sounds better to me. Anyways, satin finish, I don't think the finish matters. It's really just to hold those layers together. Is this the best option? I don't know. This is the option that I first tried, and it seems to work well enough. So I've stuck with it. If you guys have a suggestion for, I'm not going to use super glue, that's for sure. That's too expensive, and I think it's overkill. If you guys have a suggestion on another glue to try, I'm totally open to it, so please let me know in the comment section. This seems to work well. The issue with trying to glue cards together is that they have a relatively glossy finish, and so you can imagine like a gloss on gloss doesn't really want to stick very well, because essentially what we're doing at the end is sticking all these layers together. So what I've been doing lately, which I'll show you at the end, is I've been taking my X-Acto knife and I've been scoring around. So like for the Ira, for example, I'll do it a little bit later when we're in fast forward, but I would turn it over and I would go around and I would score the back. I kind of settled, and I don't know if this is making a significant difference, but it makes me feel better about it. I kind of score around the back. You're not going to see this. It's going to be glued against another layer. And I kind of do this like crosshatch pattern just to provide some grip and some surface area for the glue to kind of better adhere. Again, don't know if it's making a difference, but it makes me feel better. So you'll see me do this probably in fast forward a little bit later. But, and you know, I would, if it's going on this layer, I would go around, obviously, paying attention not to mess with anything that's going to be front facing at the forefront, but going around the same spot and sort of cross-hatching that as well, so that I have some texture on both sides that the glue can kind of better adhere to. Okay, so those are my tools: my X-Acto knife, my markers to get rid of some whiting around the edges, my Mod Podge, which again, if you have a better suggestion, please let me know. My paintbrush, the Mod Podge is great. Mod Podge, whatever, is great because it's water soluble, so it doesn't gum up your. You can just run this through water when you're done. It doesn't gum up your paintbrush, but this is what I use to get a nice thin coat over, you know, whatever I'm gluing, right? So, anyways, that's the bulk of it. Again, the reason I chose Ira, cool example. So she has a couple friends in the background, this guy, and they all seem to sit at slightly different levels. So rather than just doing, you know, again, I could end it here. I could glue these layers together and I'd have a pretty cool altar. Rather, I'm going to cut these and I'm going to, you know, use my amazing editing skills. I have 0 editing skills. But I'm going to try and figure out how to either fast forward through or do some, not stop motion, what is it called? Time lapse to, you know, fast forward through some cutting. So I'm going to cut these other 2 layers. It's going to end up being 5 thick rather than 3. So the idea, background foil card, for this dude is all that's going to be in this layer. But of course, you know, I have to actually... all 3 of these characters are going to be cut out in this layer. In this layer, I'm only going to cut out Ira and my guy. And you'll understand why I'm doing this by the end. And then the top layer is just Ira. So Ira is actually going to be 3 layers thick. This guy is going to be 2 layers thick. And this guy's going to be 1 layer thick in the very background before our background foil card. So what I'll end up with is this stack of cards, 5 deep, which I will then glue. Oh, it's important to have like a heavy book around too. As soon, like once you glue a layer, it's good to kind of put it under the book so that everything gets squished together while you're working on gluing the next layer. So, anyways, really straightforward. Like I said, I basically just explained the whole process. I am going to do some cutting here on screen and try and figure out how to fast forward through it. Hopefully it works. If not, I'll cut a little bit, and we'll figure it out. And then I'll come back to you with the final product. It's very cold in my basement, which is where I do these recordings. There's like an extreme cold warning outside and stuff, and my basement is not super warm, so I'm suffering for you guys. Hope you enjoy, though. I hope you guys learned a lot from this, guys and gals. I hope you learn a lot from this process and that you can make your own mini Shadowbox altars and that you enjoy. So I'm going to get to work here, probably pop some music on and figure out how to fast forward through this stuff, okay? Thanks very much, guys. I'll come back at the end and give you a bit of an update, okay? We're going to get to cutting. I moved my mic out of the way. By the way, I'm in this layer. I'm just going to cut Ira and her next friend. So these are the 2 only things, plus, you know, the border and everything. So this guy's going to be cut out for now. The last layer will contain that guy, okay? Just by the way. All right, moment of truth. We're gonna peel some of these layers away. So because I have some pretty fine detail, I like to really take my time kind of separating what I just cut, essentially, making sure that I maybe going over sections that you're not so confident that you got good. You don't want to rip anything at this point, right? There you go. Especially her hair here, there's some really fine, so, oops. Oh, that ended up working out. So I'm going to go in and actually take out, there's some more detail I'd like to pull out of those little strand sections of hair. You can always use your tool. You'll see me do this once in a while to punch sections through the back. There you go. So a few little details that I missed. I want to cut out the little gap between her body and her arm here. I want to cut out little gaps in her super, super fine detailed hair. So we'll get to that. So you have to be very, very careful when you're doing that fine detail work. As you can see, I kind of broke a section there, but that should be fine. It's just kind of a little flyaway hair anyways. But yeah, very careful when you're dealing with thin pieces of paper like that. Obviously, they rip quite easily. You know what? I just decided to, because that part was ripping, and I already got the detail on the front. So I think it's fine if I get rid of it, right? So my second layer doesn't actually have that little right section of flyaway hair, which I think is fine. All right, getting there. So my second layer has our new friend here, right? And it still has Ira. So now I have 2 layers of Ira. Our one little friend, our last layer, which I'm going to cut in just a second here, is going to have, I'm going to cut out all 3 characters now, right? So Ira's going to be 3 deep, he's going to be 2 deep, and then we're going to have our last little friend here in the background, and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like all layered together. All right, so the bulk of it is done. Let's layer it and see what it looks like. So I have my 5 layers, right? So front layer, just the border. Next layer is going to be just Ira, then Ira and her one friend, Ira and her two friends, and the background. So let's layer it up and take a look and get, obviously still some finishing touches to do. Marker, I'll show you what I mean by the white edges. So you can see the layers kind of build, right? We'll do that slower. So border and Ira. Border Ira and one friend. Oop. Border going behind Ira. Border Ira and two friends. So they all set at slightly different depths, and Ira's getting taller, right? So making more of that Shadowbox style. Then background. So this is going to be our final product. Obviously some gluing to do, which I'll do a bit of. You can kind of see, you can see what I mean now with the white edges, okay? See along her hair here, white, along the scarf, white, along our friends' heads, white. I want to blend that with the art. So that's the purpose of the markers. You can see we don't have that on the layer that I already finished. So next course of action, I'll give you one final look at our initial look of the final product. Okay, gotta take a marker to the white edges. I'm gonna do some scoring, which is gonna take some time to try and make sure that things are adhering properly. Do some gluing, and then it has to cure. So it actually, if you read the instructions on the Mod Podge, 2 weeks I think to cure. So I like to keep it under a book for a solid few days. Once in a while I'll take it out to let it air out sort of thing, but I want it to be, I've had some issues with curling. They curl slightly. I've had one that stayed straight as a board. Don't know what I did special with that one, but good idea to keep it, under a book as long as possible while it cures. So anyways, let's get to work. I'm going to take care of some of the edges of our two new layers. I'll show you quickly how that's done, and then we'll get to gluing. The beauty of this stuff is it also doesn't stick to the glossy card, so if I do get some on the card, for example, I can just rub it off with my thumb. So I'm always careful. I'm trying to just get the edges, but if I get some on the card, I'm just rubbing it off. So I just went around with my brown initially. Brown seems to work well on her kind of garment as well as her hair. I left, I'm going to go in with some red. Maybe on him too. He has a lot of red undertones. Maybe some brown on him as well. But I'm going to grab the red in a second and go over the scarf and maybe some of his silhouette. Grab a nice light blue for the border here, help the border pop a bit. All right, I think we're done with that. So now, again, I don't know if it's worthwhile, but I'm going to do some cross hatching to give everything as much opportunity as possible to adhere. Just going to double check. You can kind of see the edges now. The marker makes a big difference other than, instead of having just white edges, we have edges that sort of match the border, so we don't see any of that fraying anymore, which I think goes a long way as well. It's worth it, the extra effort. So I'm gonna do some cross hatching. Again, not the funnest job. one layer at a time, just to give everything as much possible chance to adhere to every other layer. Okay, here we go. This is the scary part. So the next layer, obviously a lot of this is going to be visible. So I really have to make sure just to kind of scratch where it's going to be making contact or where it's going to be covered up by this border. So I can't scratch the name. The name is going to be poking through. So I really need to be careful to just catch the topmost border. Again, just to make sure that I'm giving it as much opportunity as possible to really adhere. I don't want layers peeling apart over time or anything like that. This is all going to be covered. Basically, the border is fair game. The border is going to be covered by another layer. So I'm going to get back to work. This is kind of the scariest part of the process. I am also, it's important that my cards adhere to my foil. It's hard to know where to scratch and where not to scratch because I basically have to emulate this pattern on here. I don't want to scratch any of the stuff that's actually going to show through, so this where it's empty. So I tend to be a bit conservative when I'm, scratching the foil card. I know I'm safe to go over the name as well as the border. That's all going to be covered. But when it comes to, the actual background here, I'm going to be quite conservative in terms of what I'm going to actually scratch. So you'll see that in a second. Well, I'm feeling a bit paranoid today, so I'm actually not going to do any scratching within the border, and I'm going to hope for the best. Previously I wasn't doing any of the scratching at all. I do think it gives it the best chance to kind of, for all of the layers to adhere. So I don't think it's a bad idea, definitely. But this is what I'm left with. So I have my 5 layers ready to go. I'm going to kind of start from the bottom and start layering up. So this one, then this one, here, here, here. I'm going to start layering them up. As mentioned, I didn't bring a weight. I have a book here, so maybe we'll have a little station next door where I can put my final product and make sure that things are being pressed together. I'm going to clean up a little bit, just moving, my markers I don't need anymore. The scrap paper that I've cut up. I'm going to clean up my workstation here a little bit. And we'll do some gluing together. You'll notice that there's little glue spots all over my... This is just a clipboard, by the way, but you can use whatever. I know there's like specialized mats that you can use for cutting with X-Acto knives and stuff. So, pick yourself up one of those maybe. But anyways, we're going to get some gluing. In between, as I'm gluing up the next layer, I'm going to be pressing. I'm going to try and figure out a setup here. I came unprepared for pressing, but anyways, we'll get it done upstairs, worst case. Oh, I should have also brought a toothpick. I might run upstairs and grab a couple things. A toothpick, so once I'm doing my gluing, you're going to get some glue in areas that you don't want glue. So it's important to have a little toothpick. I usually let it dry a little bit, and then it's easy to chip off with a toothpick. Toothpick is default if you're doing painting altars, which I might show you and do a tutorial down the road. You're also using a toothpick to kind of clean up some areas where you got paint, where you don't want paint. So same idea with the glue. You just got to get rid of that on the surface after it's dried a little bit. So I'm going to run upstairs, grab a toothpick, grab a couple last minute supplies here, come back down, we'll do some gluing, okay? All right, I set up a little pressing station next to me, so I'll throw the card down there in between. I got a toothpick, chip off some glue. So let's get to some gluing. I like to just dab a few spots. A little bit of glue goes a long way, and then just kind of spread it out with the paintbrush. Try as much as possible to keep the glue on the card. If you get any on the clipboard and then move the card over, you're going to have some wet glue that ends up on the back of the card, which you'll have to chip off because you want the back of the card to be clean as well. You'll be able to see that. Now that I think about it, I should have probably done all of this on here because I'm not going to know where the silhouette is. So it's okay if I have some glue. In this case, I'm going to have some glue on both sides a little bit. But I made an oops. I'm going to transfer the glue, and I'm actually just going to layer the glue on the layer that's going to go down on the next layer. That way I don't need to kind of do any guesswork as to where I need to apply glue. I'm just going to cover everything that's been cut. I'm also trying to work somewhat quickly. I don't, it does take a long time for the glue to fully cure, but it does start to dry pretty quick. So I want to, see I got some glue on the clipboard there. I want to avoid that spot. But I want to, I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, before the glue dries, I want to be able to layer it on, of course, so. Just going to borrow from this glob and spread some glue out. Really want to get all the way to the edges while trying to keep glue off of the clipboard just to minimize the mess I need to clean up afterwards. All the little details. Okay, so I'm going to, I don't want to slap it down and then slide it around. I'm going to try and line it up as much as possible because this will also minimize cleanup afterwards. Once I'm happy that they're lined up, I'm just going to press down and try and adhere those two layers. Again, don't worry too much. So that's the thing. So if I have glue, I did a pretty good job. I have a couple glue sections on the bottom. See on the edge there that I'll have to clean up with the toothpick. But I did an okay job. I want to really make sure that my cards are lined up. And it's at this point that in the meantime, while I glue my next layer, which will be this layer, I'm going to throw this stack here under my book press. To give it a chance to kind of adhere, I'm going to go in with the next layer. My hands are getting cold. It's so much warmer upstairs when I ran up there to grab some stuff. I'm suffering for you guys. Okay. As you can see, it's a thin coat. I'm actually stealing glue from some sections to help it spread out. That looks pretty good to me. So we'll grab our stack again. And moment of truth. Trying not to put some glue on the surfaces, but again, trying to line it up as closely as possible. Holding the edges, pressing down. Making sure everything's lined up. Now is the only time you can make adjustments while it's still wet. So important to make sure everything is aligned. Do it right the first time, and then throw it under the book again. This layer is the frontmost layer, so I don't want to get glue on the front, because the front of this card, you know, the IRA that is at the front of this card is the one that's going to be right at the forefront. So if I get glue on the top there, I'm making work for myself. It means I'm going to have to go over with my toothpick there. So I'm just being a little extra careful with this layer, making sure glue coverage is good too. May have used a bit too much glue here, and I'll show you what you do if you do use too much glue. You can just transfer it onto your next layer that you're about to glue. So I'm actually going to do that. Get rid of a bit. We want to keep a thin layer. It's probably going to end up being a bit of a longer video, by the way, but I hope you guys find it helpful. Starting to come together. We just have our border left, so I'll throw this under the book. We will glue our last layer. This one's not going to need very much glue at all, so just a couple dabs in the corners. Oof, that's probably too much already. So some glue on the front here, so I'm just gonna, ooh, I got a lot of glue on the front. Try and get rid of it while it's wet. Not a bad idea. Nah, we'll have to fix it with the toothpick. Alright, move my stuff, get rid of some glue so I don't get glue on the back of the card. And our last layer. That's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to do some cleaning so you can see, obviously, some glue at the bottom on the border here. We're going to have to chip some of that away. While it's wet, it's quite easy to chip away. You'll even see just gently with the toothpick, I can get rid of it. But I'm just going to set this under the book just to get layers adhered, and then we will do some chipping. Okay, so last thing. While the glue is still wet, you can kind of go over those glue spots with the toothpick. I don't know if you can see what I'm actually doing here, but these spots right here, hard to do it looking at the camera feed, but I think you get the picture. So I'm gonna do that a little bit. The back as well. So, ooh, yeah, made a bit of a mess of the back. Every time we put it down on the clipboard, if there is glue there, you know, the card's gonna pick it up. So I also don't want to play with it too much. I do want to make sure that the cards or the layers are adhered and have an opportunity to adhere to one another. So, you know, I'll pop it under the book, pull it out, do some scraping, and so on and so forth. But this is essentially our finished product. You can see kind of Ira's a few layers deep. I'll take some better pictures to post as well. We have our friends at different layers. We have our border that really stands out. We have our nice little foil background. So anyways, I hope you guys learned something from this, and I hope you guys attempt your own mini Shadowbox altar. If you do, please let me know. So I'm on social media. I'm not very good on social media, but I have a Twitter and an Instagram now at Zen State Fab, all lowercase, at Zen State Fab at both, well, on YouTube as well as on Instagram and Twitter. So if you attempt your own Shadowbox altar, I'd love to see it. Please post an image of it on Twitter or Instagram and tag me. Yeah, so anyways, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for hanging out. I know this is probably a longer video, but again, I hope you guys found it useful. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we'll chat again real soon. Okay, cheers.